much for coming out tonight in support of Paige and A Town with Half the Lights On. Before we get started, I did want to talk really quickly about a couple other events we have coming up this week. So another Kansas native, Julie Murphy, is going to be here on Thursday. This is her new beginning reader chapter series called Catty Corner. It's about a little girl who is half cat, half girl, and she gets into hijinks. So Julie will be here on Thursday at 5 p.m. to talk about this, and she'll also do a signing after if you're a fan of any of her other work. And then of course Saturday, as we all know, is Independent Bookstore Day. We have a lot of things going on all day from 9 to 5, so come out and see us. But Grant Snyder, again, Wichita native, will be here at 11 to do story time, and then we'll do a signing afterwards. So come out and see us this week. We've got a lot of great authors. But we are here today to talk about Paige. So Paige is an author, a teacher, and a journalist who spent half her life in Kansas and the other half in California. She was working as a reporter for the Los Angeles Times and Pacifica Radio. Her work appears in many publications reconciling themes of diaspora, mysticism, addiction, classism.
Sid Solving was a chef, and he ran his grandfather's business into the ground. And so part of the community and how they change the community by being there and how they're changed by the community that they're in. And yeah. I'm trying not to put any spoilers out because there's a lot, it's hard to talk about it without spoilers. So.
It is, yeah. So we have Sid Solving, his wife Scarlett, who's originally from Goodnight, Kansas, and their daughter Harlem, who's 14.
Yes.
And then they meet another teenage girl named Disco. And Harlem and Disco are kind of outsiders.
They're both outsiders, yeah. And Disco Kennedy is, for those of you who knew me as a tween, it was pretty much me. I was like, I had just written another book before that was like very confessional, and I wanted to, I felt really exposed. So in this book, I was like, I gotta hide the fact that this is me. So I'm like, how can I hide that this is me? So I was like, I'll make her like country music, and then no one will ever know it's me. But then I started obsessively researching country. I'm obsessive about research, and so I started obsessively researching country music, and then I became completely obsessed with it. And but yeah, that's her thing. And she goes to the Mayday Diner to listen to country music because her mother's a religious zealot who won't let her listen to any country music at home. And so she's determined to save the Mayday, and she sort of lures the Solving family into buying the Mayday. And then Harlem is from New York, and so she just does not want to be in Goodnight, Kansas. And I grew up very much as a fish out of water, even though we moved here when I was 5 weeks old. And but I just always felt like a fish out of water here. And so both of those characters sort of captured that.
So Disco, like she said, is on this mission to save the Mayday Diner, which is sort of the heart and soul of Goodnight, Kansas. And Disco, that's the only place she really feels comfortable. She can listen to her music. So did you pull from any real places that were kind of the Mayday for you?
There were a lot of different Mayday diners in my life, I think, because I got sober really young, and so diners became really, really important, and staying at diners really late at night, drinking a lot of coffee, and occasionally getting kicked out of diners. In fact, I think there's some people here who have gotten kicked out of diners with me. But yeah, there were a lot of them over the years. There was one in Manhattan, Kansas called Bob's Diner, and the waitresses would kind of abuse you a little bit sometimes. And it's one of the things I really loved about that. There's a certain Kansas waitress, and there's a line in the book that Sid Solving says, as far as I can tell, the waitresses rule Kansas. And I felt like that was true. There's just a certain style of waitress that captures Kansas to me, and it was something that I really missed when I moved to Los Angeles, and there was an authenticity about it, and just kind of a grit that I really missed, especially not so much in Wichita. Wichita is a little bit glitchier, I think, but a little more at the scale. But like from living in Manhattan, Kansas, and getting to explore some of the towns around there. One in particular that I won't call out because it's too small and they'd be mad at me, but yeah.
So kind of touching on that, when you were talking about, one of the things you missed when you left Kansas, you talked a little bit about when you left. In the end of the book, there's this interview, and you talked about how you kind of started the idea, like writing this fictional town of Goodnight, Kansas, kind of out of that homesickness. So like, what was that process as? Like, how was that for you to kind of overcome that homesickness?
I think I had been in LA about 5 years. I was living in Hollywood, and I was so homesick. And that was sort of the beginning. I would listen to country music because I missed Kansas, and it just felt like Kansas to me. And I started writing these stories, and I just created this little town. And I sort of did it unconsciously, like these characters just started to develop. And I would just do it for fun, and at the time I was a reporter for Pacifica Radio, and I felt like my job was just to keep track of everything that was wrong with the world, to know how bad it was, to keep statistics on everything bad that was happening, and to record it and document it and research the context of it, which is even more depressing. And I was like always sort of suicidal over it, like the condition of the world to me was just depressing. And that was in 2005. And we were in the middle of a war, and I just couldn't imagine that things could ever get worse than that. And all day I was like, that was my whole life, was just, I was an activist at the time too, so I would go report on all these bad things, and then at night I would go protest. And sometimes I would cover the actual rallies that I was protesting at. And so I was totally inundated with this. And then around that time I was hired by a guy who wanted to write a website called American Genocide. And he's like, I need you to research everything bad the United States has ever done and document it. And I was like, this is right up my alley. And he paid me to research. And after several years of this, doing this kind of on the side, I was so suicidal. I was just totally depressed. And around that time is when I started writing these stories, and it was just this kind of fictitious fantasy world that I couldn't really go back to Kansas. But so I would just sort of live in this sort of fantasy world. And I didn't intend for it to be a book, or even, they weren't even really stories. They were like more like sketches that I would sort of escape to. And then over the years I just kept writing them. And then I think when I started to write, I wrote another book. It was called Goodnight, Kansas. And it was the world and the characters, but it was really Disco Kennedy's story, and it was about her as a failed country singer. And really, at that time, my kids had just been born. They were like 1 and 2, and I was like, I gotta find a job, because I'm not pulling my weight around here. These babies, I need to get a real job. And because things were rough, we were kind of financially struggling, and so I was like, well, what can I do? And I looked for jobs with my creative writing degree, and no one was hiring, anyone with a creative writing degree. So I I remember finding the only job that I qualified for was answering phones for Enterprise rental car. They were the only ones that seemed to be hiring someone with my particular skill set in creative writing. And I had to drive 45 minutes to get there, and it wouldn't have covered childcare. So I was like, oh shit, I gotta do something. So I was like, maybe I'll just real quick write a novel. Because I had written another one, but it was about Hollywood communists protesting the war, and I spent 5 years trying to find an agent, and they were like, no, I don't want it. So I was like, I know how to write a novel, so I'll just write real quick, and write a novel. I gave myself, I think, 3 or 4 months, had a schedule, and I wrote this thing, and Disco was from a short story I had written from a class, actually, and the professor had said, I really think you should turn this into a novel. And so I was like, oh, right, I'll do that. So I wrote the book about disco, and then I got an agent pretty right away, and we spent 2 years rewriting it. And I was like getting up at 4 a.m. I was like skeletal from trying to write this book. And then at the end of 2 years, she was like, I think it's just not ready, and I think I gotta let you go because it's been 2 years. And I was just so depressed because I had worked so hard on it, and the problem was, though, that I had this world, and the agent had said that. She said, you have this amazing world you created, but it doesn't really match the other book that we started with. And so I knew I had this little town and these characters that I was totally in love with, and I mean, Goodnight was so real to me. It had become completely real. And so I kind of went through like Sid Solving's depression, which is really what inspired part of his character. Just that he had failed as a chef, and that was interesting to me too, because I think chefs are a lot like writers, and the suicide rates for chefs are very high, and so they are for writers and artists also. And I was really into Anthony Bourdain at the time, and so that was sort of an inspiration too. But yeah, I decided that I was going to try to sort of salvage what was left of this novel by taking all the backstory that was in the way and creating a new thing. And I wasn't sure which character to start with, but I was sick of Disco. I was just so sick of Disco Kennedy, and I felt like she was in my way. So I started playing with the other characters' point of views, and I would write letters to try to find which voice to go to, and then I just couldn't pick one. So I thought, well, I'll just use all of them. I'll just do a multiple POV story, and that's a really long explanation. Sorry. I could keep going, but I think I should. Next.
Yeah, so if you aren't aware, this book is an epistolary novel, so it's told in emails and chats and journal entries, which is one of my favorite formats of writing. If you've never read an epistolary novel before, this is a great one to start with. Partly because Paige did such a great job of giving every character a very distinct voice, which I think is difficult in this format because you're having to write their actual thoughts and words down on a page. So is it because you were kind of writing these sketches and snippets and letters, or how did you make the transition to this format?
Yeah, that was kind of how it started. Like I was writing letters between them, just trying to feel their voices and figure out which one would be the right voice to tell the story. And yeah, I had just read 2 epistolaries back to back, not on purpose. I didn't even know what they were. I just randomly picked up a couple books, and they turned out to be epistolary 2 in a row, and I love them. I love jumping around from different characters, and I have ADHD really bad, so it's better for my reading because I have a hard time reading, and so it's like good to be kind of short and jumping around. And yeah, one of those was it was that. What was it called? The Guernsey Literary Potato Peel
One of my
Society.
favorite books, yes.
I like that, and I liked that one. It starts out kind of soft, and you think it's this kind of soft story, and then there's dying children in the Holocaust, and you're like, which I appreciate. But yeah, so I had just read those 2, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll try to write it. Maybe I'll try to write epistolary, and then what really happened then was I thought, well, I could do a news story. And when I wrote a news story, because I hadn't written news for a while, and I was like, this is fun, and I love community newspapers and like neighborhood newspapers, and I started like looking them up all over, and because of the internet, you can read like the most podunk town in Maryland or like Maine, like all over any other countries, you know, and you can read these little community newspapers, and they have this voice that's so personal. And like they don't care who's reading it. They're writing to their community and the guy down the street and whoever like lost their goat. And I just fell in love with those voices, and you feel kind of like a voyeur a little bit listening to them because they're so personal and so intimate. And like coming from the world of reporting, which is like not intimate, and like that's what you train as a journalist not to do. You're like trying to get rid of that sort of personal voice and that tone, and trying to take out all the humanity. And so that was a really fun thing to play with the voice of the newspaper, the local newspaper.
And the local newspaper has a mystery editor. No one knows who the editor is. So I thought that was a fun like small town touch. And some of my other favorite just like small town sort of Kansas isms is there's also a mystery because all the wind chimes are disappearing. And also when the Solvings move into their grandfather's home, he had alpacas that live in the house with him. So was this just part of your process in creating Goodnight, or did you have specific things you were pulling from?
Well, I love wind chimes, and there's something I associate with Wichita with growing up just because of the wind. And I just always loved them, and I feel like my whole childhood, like if I think about it, I hear not just wind chimes, but lots of them whipping in the wind, and the crazy wind here. And I kind of collect wind chimes too. Like I really can't get enough of them. But also, like I just love animals. Like we've rescued a lot of animals, and we dog sit, and we just have. I would take all the animals, every kind. If I could, and have a dream of living on a farm so I can have, animals. But I just wanted to pick an animal that was kind of funny to me. So alpacas are bizarre. They're just totally weird. And I watched lots of videos of alpacas to try to just get in touch with like the world of alpacas, and because I didn't grow up with any alpacas, and I don't remember seeing one even much in growing up. But yeah, I just wanted to have, like in my books, I'm so in it when I write it, you know, and so I need like the room to smell good, like I'm in it. And I need there to be animals, and so I was like, what kind of animals do I want to be in the room while I'm in this room, right? You know, because you're writing for years, so like you're in it, and like you want animals anyway. So alpacas, they just, but yeah, the research was really fun for that, but yeah.
Good. The alpacas they are main characters. So if I haven't sold you on this book yet, that really should do it. So you kind of talked about the parallels between Sid's depression, your depression, those kind of artistic parallels. So one of the things that Sid had kind of lost after he lost his family business, he kind of lost his creative drive, and one of the ways that that manifested for him was he would dream about food, and he kind of lost that. And as he kind of starts getting his mojo back, those food dreams kind of start coming back to him. Is there anything similar for you in your creative process that you kind of associate that with?
Not so much dreams, but one of the things that was interesting to me about writing the food, because I'm I'm not really a food person at all, and I'm a terrible cook. My family will attest to that, and so food is like very theoretical for me. And I've been a vegetarian, and I've got OCD, and I can only eat like certain foods, and like I don't like certain colored foods, and so like when I'm obsessed with watching cooking shows, and when I would watch them, I like would see foods and like normal foods that everyone else has tried I've never eaten in my life, and I don't even want to look like I'm just really neurotic about food, and so but because of that, like I have synesthesia, and so like when I watch cooking shows, like I actually get a taste in my mouth, but it's not the taste of the food. Well, I wouldn't know. It's just like the taste. Like I taste in all colors. Like when I see colors, I get a taste in my mouth, and sometimes I smell them. And but so like I would watch these cooking shows, and I would get all these tastes in my mouth, and they were really interesting. And one of the things that is funny because my cooking show obsession just started because our cable had gone out. In like, I think it was 2006 or 7, my cable went out and we could only get one channel, and it was Bravo, and they were playing a marathon of Top Chef for like 2 weeks. Like nothing but Top Chef marathon over and over again. And since we couldn't get anything else on TV, and I was really lonely, and so I would just put the TV on and we'd watch cooking shows. And I think because of my synesthesia, I was like, I could taste it, and I thought it was really interesting. And I just became obsessed with watching them after that. And I found them comforting too. Like I think maybe because I was a reporter at the time and was, you know, depressed, like I found it really comforting to watch something where, you know, no one's gonna die. No one's gonna get murdered, and like you know how it's gonna end. They're gonna eat it, and like so I found that really comforting. Now I forgot what the question was.
I feel like you answered it. I'm asking the parallels between Sid and his kind of loss of his creative drive, and if you had anything similar.
Oh, right. One of the things that I found really interesting, and I stole this from Top Chef, is like they would have exercises where they'd be like, all right, pick the 7 deadly sins, and you have to pick like one deadly sin and create a dish around it. And I was fascinated by that. Like I just thought, or it was so, it was just taking any kind of abstract concept and then trying to represent it in an artistic form, whether it's like writing or art or food. That just totally fascinated me, and I played with that a lot in the book because I tried to think of like what dish, like he does tagliatelle, and I was like, what is tagliatelle? It's a tantrum on a plate, like, and that was really, well, I love noodles, like noodles are so weird, and there's so many noodles, and like to me, like each one has a kind of I don't know, maybe that's synesthesia actually, but it seems like they each have a personality and like a certain emotion attached. But like at one point, like one of the critics says, your food was an oath of silence on a plate, and that was really fun, like playing with like different ideas of like what would that taste like what ingredients, what foods would be an oath of silence on a plate, and another dish he called it an American scream, and I was like, what is the book? Stone Soup, the children's story, you guys know Stone Soup? It's always been one of my very favorite books of all time, and it's funny because they say you can tell a lot about a person by what their first favorite book was, and that was one of mine, and I love that idea of sort of tricking people into helping other people, and but it is contagious, and we need that. We really need that right now, especially I think when you think about the problems of our country, the problems of the world, they seem so big. And they're big, but like the solutions, they have to be small. Like when you can't control something on a national level or a world level, all you can do is just kind of do the next right thing and find some small way. And if you can't affect like a national outcome, you can affect a local outcome, you know, and we have to. But also I think like being aware of like people in our community who need us. And yeah, because it's so hard to ask for help when you need it. And yeah, one of the influences is I'm a huge fan of It's a Wonderful Life. And in fact, I was worried a little bit that that the book would be too sentimental, because I didn't intend for it to be like this like feel-good, happy book. It just kind of went that way, and so I went with it. But I had read about how Frank Capra, the writer and director of It's a Wonderful Life, that he was criticized when the book or the movie first came out for being so sentimental, too sentimental, and it kind of flopped at the box office actually, and then it just all of a sudden became this beloved movie, and then of course he was accused of being a communist because of all the communist themes in the movie, which I felt like that gave me permission to, like, it balances the sentimentality. I'm like, there's plenty of communism too.
Yes, communism, alpacas, wind chime thieves, you know, it's got everything. Well, I want to open up the floor for just a few minutes if anyone has any questions to ask Paige about the book. Start here.
So the process of getting a book published, we've had a few authors visit with us about that. What was your process of finally finding someone to publish your book?
Yeah, it's funny, like I said, I spent 5 years trying to get my first book published, but you know, it was called After the Revolution, We'll All Wear Tiaras, and it was pretty radical, I guess. But then my second book, like I said, it was 2 years, and then they cut me loose. And then this book, it was amazing because the other two books I sent out to like 20,000, like all the agents basically, all of them. And then this one I only sent it out to about 5 agents. And then one of the agents right away said that they wanted to read it and asked for exclusivity, so I wasn't allowed to send it to anyone else. So, but it took them like 9 months. They kind of sat on it for 9 months, and at the end they were like, yeah, we're gonna pass. And I was like, by then I had lost all momentum, but also by then I had gotten accepted to graduate school, and January 6th had just happened, and graduate school in Canada, so I was like, oh, I'm just gonna forget about that book, and I'm just gonna go to Canada. Hang out in Canada for a while, go to get my MFA. And then while I was getting my MFA, after I'd completely forgotten the book, I barely was aware that it was weird, I just wrote it and kind of left it. And I got this email from an agent, and she was like, I was the intern for the agent who read your book and passed on it, and she said, I swore to myself if I ever became a real agent that I would look you up and see if you had anyone. And she's like, are you doing anything? Like, do you have an agent? And I was like, you know, no, I'm not really seeing anyone right now. So yeah, she was like, well, I'm not gonna make promises, but I'll read it again. And she read it again. It was like, then it happened really fast. Like, yeah, then it happened really fast. She would sign me, and that kind of sucked though, because I was trying to write my thesis, and I was in graduate school, and like graduate school is really hard. It's like really hard, and I had like 2 kids, and to raise and trying to go to graduate school, and then also rewrite a novel at the same time. So that was weird, but that made it a completely different experience, that I was sort of running two finish lines at the exact same time. And in fact, my agent, when she had me do my first rewrite, no, it's my last rewrite, she picked a date that just happened to be 3 days before my thesis deadline for graduate school. She's like, how about this date? And being a Kansan, I was like, sure, I can do that. Of course I can do that, no problem. And she's like, okay, great. And then I, suffered. Suffered. It was painful, but I did get them in on time. And then the publisher, I was really happy it was a Midwestern publisher. Source books that picked it up, and that, yeah, it's been a really good experience. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Melissa?
So I read it and loved it. It was really fun. So first off, I just have to say you did a really good job of doing so I grew up in a very small town, and that feeling when you have somebody write about your experience and you're like, only I'm allowed to say bad things or whatever, and I felt like you did a phenomenal job in adding the sweet parts, but also the very real crusty parts. And I just, it was really funny. So you were talking about how you didn't like, or you had kind of gotten away from Disco's character for a while, and you were kind of over that. So along with those crusty characters, you have a really good one in here with that Virginia Easton and her things. I thought she was hilarious, but it was also very accurate. And I've heard the exact same things in maybe not all in one person, but so just out of curiosity, did you really have a lot of fun writing her, or did you have any other characters that ended up being like ones that you really loved in this book?
She was fun because growing up in Kansas, you have like that character that's the kind of judgy, very starchy, like she irons her shirt's very ironed, big shiny cross, but not too big. A lot of white, and I just have been getting in those people's way my whole childhood and getting the what for that. So yeah, those were. It's always been like it's sort of a composite of many women that I've known over the years, and I think also growing up in such a Christian place where I wasn't a Christian, and so I was a target for some very well-intentioned people who, and actually this book is very much I think an apology to all the churches that tried so hard. And they, because my friends were always taking me to church, but there was always these stiff, angry women in the corner who you could just feel the judgment across the room, and they can be pretty destructive, But I really didn't want her to be one-dimensional, and so that was kind of fun trying to get into her head to try to ask myself how do I not create this stereotype. Even though for me, she kind of is a stereotype. She's this villain that's followed me in my childhood, and I realized, so I was like, okay, well, what makes this mean woman tick? And I thought, well, she thinks things should be the way they are. And, but I'm in my late 40s, and I think things should be a certain way, and the young, I'm getting to that age where I'm like, what the hell? They shouldn't be doing this, and TikTok, everything's fast, everything's so fast, and I'm and everything gets on, I'm my daughter's always throwing her phone at look at this, and it's fast TikTok movement, and I'm like, yeah, so I've gotten to this point in my life where I think things could be the way they used to be a little bit, and a lot, and I miss newspapers, stuff like that, just little things that I see getting lost with age, and some of it's very good, and then some of it is horrible, some of the things that are being lost, and the sense of dignity and that I kind of miss, and just so many little things day to day that I miss, and so that was a way that I kind of got into her character, because I was like, oh, well, she just wants it to be the way it was when she grew up, and but that was real fun, because then I was like, women should be women, and men should hold doors, and dogs shouldn't be allowed in stores, and so yeah, she was kind of fun, but I tried not to make any characters. That's not true. So there were some evil characters. That was fun too. I had an evil landlord that was just, well, I've had many evil landlords actually, and no heat, below zero record cold, no heat, won't return phone calls, had to move in with a friend because I just didn't have heat, stuff like that. So I got to create the evil landlord and seek my revenge that way, and evil bosses, stuff like that. but Disco really was, I think, my overall favorite character, just because I think I was such a wingnut growing up. I was such a weirdo, and a lot of people in this room could attest to that. And so it was fun to kind of create this character and reconcile some of the sense of just being, always feeling like I didn't belong. And yeah, so I really love her for that, and I loved giving her a sense of community. And I mean, now I look back and I realize, like, oh, I did belong. I was just the weirdo in the room. Like, there's always one or two, usually one. I was just the weirdo in the room. But yeah, so she was probably my favorite character to write. Actually, I have a bunch, but she's my favorite. Yeah. Oh, and more.
We've got time for one more, and I think there was a question in the back. Did I see a hand raise? If not, someone raise a hand and ask a question. Yeah.
Hi, Paige, it's Steve Heller.
Ah, Steve.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here with the book launch. And I'm proud of you, and I'm really happy for you. And my question is a simple one, but it might be hard to answer. How do you keep going? How do you find the energy and the discipline to go to the page every day and get it done and be a wife, be a mother, and do all the other things you have to do in your life?
I love that question. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for that. How do you keep going? How do you find the discipline, I think, and the motivation to keep going?
Yes.
And I mean, I definitely go through phases, but I always have like multiple projects going, so when one I lose steam with it, I switch to another one. But I started to realize at some point that I was just always going to be writing something, and whether it ever went anywhere, I just like kind of have to write all the time. But my magic trick is that I get up at 4:50 in the morning. Well, actually, I set my alarm for 4:50, and then I get up at 5. Gotta be like honest about that. But because I feel guilty that I get up at 4:50, so I'm like, I mean to get up at 4:50, but I get up at 5. And if I get up at 5:10, I'm mad at myself. But there's something magical for me that happens there, and I really, really believe like in sort of channeling. Like, I think that there's a sort of consciousness that's like the writer consciousness, and you can just tap into it, and I feel like anyone probably can. And I think the more you tap into it, the more open that channel becomes, and like then it's just a matter of like kind of getting out of the way. And the thing I like about doing it in the morning is that my brain's not awake yet, and so when I sit down, like I'll just find myself writing something. And I didn't start doing that because I had discipline, though. I started because my kids were 1 and 2, and I realized that I would never write again if I didn't get up. They got up at 7, so I was like, well, I guess I'll get up at 5, and then I can get 2 hours of writing time. Sometimes they wake up at 6, and then I kill myself. I'm like, no, I've got another hour. But I think also just like that, I just love language too. Like, I love words, and I would just I have just sat and written words. Like, I'll be like, V, and I'll just start writing V words. So for me, like, I just love language, and I love words, and so that's part of it too. And I would like to say that Steve this is like, I have so many teachers here, like, it's just like, I'm like overwhelmed by it, and like, where is she? Tracy Archibald. She was my English teacher, and I would not have graduated from high school without her, and she tricked me into going to college. At the time, I was real broke, and she was like, oh, here's a writing contest, and I would win like $50 here and like $75 here, and then one day she's like, here's one for $500, and I was like, oh. I was like, 18, I'm like, $500? So she's like, yeah, just give me some poetry, and she's like, okay, let's mail it off, and then I won, and it was the Fine Arts Achievement Award scholarship. It was a scholarship to Kansas State University, and Steve Heller was the head of the creative writing department who judged the contest. Do you remember this? He judged the contest that got me into Kansas State University, and I wasn't planning on going. Like, my plan, I had 2 plans. My first plan was to move to India to join an ashram to be of service. I was like very excited, having a spiritual awakening in high school. And yeah, actually I worked here at that time, and it was when it was Gessler's Drug, and I had like shaved my head because I was going to move to India and be a monk. And Bob Gessler, who was the drugstore owner here, was like so confused. And he was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like maybe I should fire you. But like, he's like, I've never been in this, no one's ever just shaved their head before. And I was like, but it's because of God. I'm like practicing humility. I'm giving up my ego. And so that was my mental condition when my high school graduation plan was to move to India. And my fallback plan was, well, I'll go be a homeless poet in San Francisco. That was my fallback plan. So I had no intention of going to college. So when this like scholarship came, I was like, what am I going to do with that? And I thought if I ever did go to college, of course it would be in New York City or Berkeley. And then it was like, man, wait, I'm going to move somewhere smaller than Wichita, like somewhere more hillbilly than Wichita. And so, but I went to K-State, and yeah. So, and then my art teacher, Yvonne, was there too. And they, like, I had just gotten sober at like 17, and they, like, I was a mess. And so, yeah, I'm really glad. And my old 8th grade teacher was here. I don't know if she's still here. Jan Fan. I think she had to leave early. But yeah, my 8th grade teachers here too. I love teachers. And I wouldn't be here, and certainly I wouldn't have been able to write these books. I mean, honestly, I just wouldn't be alive without the support, because I was, you know, I needed a little extra help. Not just to go to college, just to live, like, I think writers do, I think artists do, and I mean, right now, I think we all need a little extra help, like, things are just a little intense, but yeah, I'm just really grateful that, you know, so many people came down, old teachers, it's so nice. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you all so much for coming out to support Paige. Thank you so much for letting us host your release party. This was so great, and let's all give Paige another round of applause.